Today, we're taking something that honestly sounds pretty dense, a 10-module seminary course on church administration, and we're going to transform it into a really dynamic, engaging journey. If you've ever found yourself wondering how a church actually functions behind the scenes, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get started. Okay, let's dive right into this. You know, it's incredibly common to think of administration as just a secular chore, kind of like this boring distraction from the real spiritual work of the church. But this explainer is going to completely dispel that myth. Church administration is absolutely not just endless paperwork. It is the vital, sacred machinery that sustains the church's entire mission. Without good administration, the mission simply cannot happen. To really grasp this, we've got to look at the ancient concept of diaconia. Back in the early church, the apostles realized pretty quickly they couldn't preach the word and manage the daily distribution of food at the exact same time. So, as we see in the book of Acts, they appointed deacons, basically early administrators, to handle it. This established a profound theological mandate. While church administration definitely mirrors secular management in its practical tools, its driving motive is completely different. It's an act of pastoral care. It is literally the modern equivalent of washing the disciples' feet, not a position of personal privilege.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover a sacred service, preserving institutional memory, stewardship of church resources, pastoral care and people, and we'll wrap up with law, ethics, and governance. All right, starting us off with Section 1, a sacred service.
Now, good governance is fundamentally about reflecting the order and peace of Christ. In the Old Catholic tradition, this is deeply rooted in synodal deliberation, which just means walking together and making decisions as a unified body. To pull that off, healthy administration actually has to steer a very careful middle course between two extremes. On one side, you've got clericalism, treating the laity as passive recipients of decisions made entirely without their input. And on the flip side, you have chaos, which is abandoning proper order altogether. It's kind of like a wild church potluck with absolutely no sign-up sheet. The way you navigate between these two errors is through proper consultation and making sure you have clear written delegation of authority so everybody knows their role.
When you break down ecclesiastical governance into provincial, diocesan, parochial, and institutional levels, it really proves the church isn't some top-down absolute monarchy. At every single level, authority is paired with a consultative body, like a synod, a chancellor, or a parish council. It's a communion governed collegially, and it relies entirely on shared responsibility.
That brings us right to Section 2, preserving institutional memory.
We so often treat record-keeping like this tedious Friday afternoon chore that we just want to rush through, but it's actually a matter of simple justice to the congregants whose most important life moments are completely intertwined with the parish. I absolutely love this quote from the source material. Records are the memory of the church. Think about it, a single baptismal entry written down today might be relied upon decades later to establish someone's eligibility for marriage or ordination. By diligently maintaining these records, administrators are literally performing an act of preserving history for future generations.
Let's get ultra-practical for a second here. Sacramental registers are canonical, legal documents. They absolutely must be accurate and legible, which means they are always written in permanent ink, never ever in pencil. They need to be secure, ideally in a fireproof safe, but also accessible for legitimate inquiries. And here is a vital point. In our modern digital age, having backups is smart, but digital copies only supplement the paper originals. That paper register remains the true canonical record.
Now, building on those records, we have reporting, ministerial, financial, administrative, and special reports. Consistent, honest reporting is just an amazing tool. It allows a bishop to understand the true health of a parish without having to physically visit every single week. And just as importantly, it protects the administrators themselves by creating a crystal-clear paper trail of exactly what was done and why.
Moving right along into Section 3, stewardship of church resources.
All right, let's talk about money. Money given sacrificially by the faithful isn't just income. It's a sacred trust meant exclusively to serve the gospel mission. The 4 pillars for handling these funds are transparency, accountability, stewardship, and legality. If financial administration is opaque or confusing, it directly harms the mission of the church. Presenting a clear, accessible financial summary to your congregation isn't just about accounting, it's about building essential trust with the people who are giving so generously.
So the crucial point here is implementing practices like the 2-signature rule. Requiring at least 2 authorized people to sign off on significant expenditures isn't born out of suspicion or distrust. Actually, it's just ordinary good governance.
It protects the funds, yes, but it also really protects the reputation of the incredible people handling those funds from any false accusations.
Stewardship also totally applies to how we manage our time and energy, bringing us to the event planning cycle. Define, plan, organize, execute, and evaluate. This is such a clean mental model for project management. You always have to match your ambition to your capacity. We've all seen it. An overextended event with completely unrealistic timelines can actually do way more harm to a community's morale than a modest, well-executed one.
Now we're entering Section 4, Pastoral Care and People.
This is where those hard administrative skills meet the actual, daily, messy human life of a worshiping community. When it comes to sacramental preparation, whether it's baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, reconciliation, matrimony, or holy orders, tracking all this administratively ensures nothing is celebrated informally or without the proper record. It makes sure that a couple preparing for marriage or a candidate for baptism receives the full, thoughtful formation they deserve. Again, good order is always in service of good ministry.
And of course, we can't talk about people without talking about volunteers. The volunteer management cycle, identify needs, recruit, train, supervise, and recognize, really helps structure how we care for them. One of the biggest takeaways here is keeping a super watchful eye out for volunteer burnout. A healthy ministry actively rotates responsibilities rather than relying indefinitely on the exact same few exhausted people. Recognizing and resting your volunteers is a profound administrative duty.
And we've reached our final section, Section 5, Law, Ethics, and Governance.
A really well-prepared administrator doesn't just react to crises. They anticipate legal and ethical issues way before they hit the fan. The church basically operates under two overlapping systems. You have canon law, which governs internal discipline and sacraments, and civil law, which governs things like contracts, employment, and property. You really have to keep both in view, because ignorance of either system is rarely accepted as an excuse.
Nowhere is this dual compliance more critical than in safeguarding. Let's be clear. Protecting children and vulnerable adults is a non-negotiable moral obligation. It is not just a legal box to check. Practices like the two-adult rule, making sure at least two adults are always present in settings with children, are designed to protect the vulnerable while simultaneously protecting the adults who are serving them.
Now, even with the absolute best policies in place, human beings are eventually going to disagree. Conflict is totally normal in any community. But there's a biblical, step-by-step process for resolving it. Listen, clarify, seek counsel, mediate, and reconcile. The ultimate goal of church administration in a conflict isn't just about winning a dispute or enforcing a verdict. It's always about restoring relationships.
This brings us to kind of the emotional and ethical peak of our explainer. The absolute best systems, policies, and financial controls simply cannot substitute for a leader's personal integrity. You could have the most accurate registers in the entire world, but if you lack pastoral warmth and humility, you fail the mission. Combining those excellent structured controls with deep pastoral care, that's the ultimate goal. Just like the quote says, sound administration exercised with integrity and humility is itself a form of love for the people of God.
So, I want to leave you with a direct question to really chew on. Looking at everything we've covered today, from record keeping and financial transparency to volunteer management and conflict resolution, which administrative skill is most urgently needed in your own parish or community right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Go out there and start applying these sacred mechanics today.